Good morning. I'm Claudia Marshall, your worship leader, and welcome to the weekly worship service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church, or as we refer to it, BBUUC. We are coming to you from our YouTube channel, as this is one of the many ways we are staying connected during this time of social distancing. We will continue to offer virtual worship programming until we can safely resume services in our church sanctuary. In addition to worship, we're continuing other opportunities to connect through our Zoom platform, including classes, small group ministries, children's chapel, parent groups, and coffee conversations. Keep an eye on the church website, calendar, Facebook page, and your email for more information on the various ways we can be keepers of the flame with the interconnection, care, and love that is the heart of our Unitarian Universalist faith. If you happen to be visiting with us and want more information about Unitarian Universalism, please refer to the website www.uua.org. Our chalice lighting this morning is by Kimberly and Tomzak Carlson, and it's called People of Memory. We are a people of memory. As inheritors of our ancestors' legacy, we hold their stories tenderly, gleaning wisdom from diverse journeys, united in hope for the future. Guide us to trust in love as we kindle this flame together.
Good morning. I am Reverend Amy Moses Lagos. I use the pronouns she and her. It is my great privilege to serve as the minister at Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church. Our opening words this morning are written by Andrew Kennedy. We come to love a church, the traditions, the history, and especially the people associated with it. And through these people, young and old, known and unknown, we reach out, both backward into history and forward into the future, to link together the generations in this imperfect but blessed community of memory and hope.
Hi everyone, I brought something with me today. Do you know what this is? It is a pinwheel, and when it's outside and the wind is blowing, the pinwheel spins. And I brought this today because I have a story to tell you that has to do with the wind. The story is called John Murray and the Winds of Change. It's written by Christy Olson and Jessica York. Sometimes the story talks about an actual wind that blows, but sometimes it talks about the idea of the image of wind. It might talk about wind to give an idea of something else that is like the wind. So when I say the winds of change, the story's talking about when changes come like the wind. You can feel them, but you can't see them or stop them. There are a lot of times in our life when we might feel the winds of change. It could be starting in a new school, or a new brother or sister arriving in the family, or moving. You might feel excited, nervous, or afraid about these changes. You never know what the wind will blow in or which way the wind blows. The wind can change directions and maybe change your life. It happened to John Murray. As a young man, John Murray had excellent fortune blow his way. He grew up in England, and he had a fine education, a steady job, a loving wife, and a young son. Life was good. But suddenly, everything changed. John Murray's wife and son became sick and died. John lost his job, lost all his money, and he was put in jail because he could not pay his bills. John was a very religious man, a universalist who had even preached about a loving God. Now he wasn't so sure what he believed. He felt like his life was over. His friends urged him to go someplace where he could start again. John Murray sailed on a ship called the Hand in Hand, and winds blew that ship across the ocean. The ship was supposed to go to New York, but there was a lot of fog in New York, and the ship couldn't go there, so it had to go to New Jersey. Well, when the ship went to New Jersey, John Murray and some other men on the boat volunteered to go ashore and get supplies and get directions for how to get back to New York. When John Murray went ashore to New Jersey, he met a man named Thomas Potter, and Thomas Potter invited him to dinner that night. So John Murray went back to Thomas Potter's house that evening. Thomas Potter told him that he was also a Universalist. He believed in a loving God. And then they went to take a walk on Thomas Potter's lands. Thomas showed him a chapel. He explained to John that he had built that chapel so that a preacher could come and preach the Universalist message of a loving God in his chapel. And he told John, "I believe you are that preacher." And John Murray said, "No, no, I am all done with preaching. That part of my life is over. And besides, when the wind changes, I'm going to have to get back on my ship and travel to New York." Well, Thomas Potter said, "I'll make you a deal. If the wind hasn't blown before Sunday, will you come and preach a sermon at my chapel?" And John Murray agreed to this deal. Now, what do you think happened? Did the wind blow? Did the Hand in Hand sail away with John Murray in it? No wind blew. No ship sailed. John Murray preached on Sunday morning, September 30th, 1770, in the chapel Thomas Potter built for him many years before. The Universalist message of the power of love was good news to many who heard. It was good news for John. The winds of change blew yet again for John Murray. He now wanted to preach more than anything, and he did for many years. And he helped found Universalism in America. He is one of the ancestors of our faith home, and we, as Unitarian Universalists, owe a special thanks to Thomas Potter. It was his hospitality that brought John Murray back to the pulpit. We also owe a special thanks to the wind that blew him in and would not blow him out. And with this, our story is told.
Today, we are grateful for many things. Here in community, we call them to mind and speak aloud some of the things that bring us joy, as well as the concerns and sorrows for loved ones and friends that we hold dear. We encourage our members to share with our community during worship by sending your joy or concern to the church office. We light a candle for thoughts and prayers for Barry M., who will undergo surgery on Tuesday, the 8th. We light a candle of good wishes for Reverend Pat R. and for Lee A., who have recently relocated to DeLand so that Pat can be closer to her father. We light this final candle for all of those joys and concerns that remain in our hearts unspoken, knowing the life and experience of every person matters, and together our lights shine brighter.
As tranquil streams that meet and merge shall be free. Free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless greed. Free from a social oath that fails to serve the cause of human need. A freedom that reveres the past, but trusts the dawning future more, and bids the soul in search of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic Church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
Our December virtual offering will go to the Clothes Closet and Food Pantry, helping people in Clay County who are in a crisis. They believe that by helping a family meet basic needs and/or pay overdue rent or utilities, they can enable them to stand on their own again. By enabling people to stay in their homes, they prevent them from having to live on the street. They strive to assist homeless and transient people by meeting immediate needs with food, clothing, toiletries, and blankets. From the beginning, the Clothes Closet and Food Pantry has always been entirely operated by volunteers and receives financial donations from churches, businesses, and civic organizations. You can find the link to our PayPal giving fund on our YouTube channel, on the donate link on our website, and give whatever you are able. To make the holidays extra special, all of your donations will be matched by an anonymous member of BBUUC. These offerings are most gratefully received during this increasing time of need.
Do you remember going to the movies? Isn't that a strange thing to think about? All of those people in one room, laughing, eating, talking, breathing together. It doesn't sound very appealing right now while we're in the middle of a pandemic. And now it's really easy to watch movies on Netflix at home or rent them on iTunes or Google Play. So some of us don't go to the movies as frequently as we used to. But I invite you to imagine going to see a movie, one that's really good, that you really like, in a genre that you like. It could be a thriller or a romantic comedy or a drama, whatever you enjoy. Imagine that the theater is full, that the audience laughs together. Imagine the whole audience is sitting on the edge of their seat wondering what's going to happen next. Imagine there's a part where some of the people in the audience are crying. And at the end, everyone bursts into applause. And as you're walking out of the theater, you smile at the other moviegoers and you feel a sense of connection with them, even though you've never met them before, because you just went through an experience together and you saw the same movie. In the book, The Storytelling Animal: How Stories Make Us Human, the writer Jonathan Gottschall explores the role and power of story in human life. And he writes this: a film takes a motley association of strangers and syncs them up. It choreographs how they feel and what they think, how fast their hearts beat, how hard they breathe, and how much they perspire. A film melds minds. It imposes emotional and psychic unity. Until the lights come up and the credits roll, a film makes people one. This experience of watching a movie together is just one example of how stories bring people together. For those who like sports, when you watch a game and you experience the drama and the excitement of that game, you're connected to people all over the country who are also watching. When you read a novel, you're experiencing the emotions of that story, and other people who read the book also experience emotions. Gottschall continues writing, I may be by myself watching Breaking Bad or 30 Rock, or reading The Da Vinci Code or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but there are millions of other people sitting on millions of other couches, being exposed to exactly the same stories and undergoing exactly the same process of neural, emotional, and physiological attunement. We are still having a communal experience. It's just spread out over space and time. Story, in other words, continues to fulfill its ancient function of binding society by reinforcing a set of common values and strengthening the ties of common culture. I disagree with Gottman here that everyone is having the exact same emotional and physiological response to a movie or TV show or book. People bring different perspectives based on their identities and histories to the stories. That impacts how we feel when we read them and see them. But I agree with his argument that stories bring diverse people together and help them feel a common bond. This happens in Unitarian Universalism. When we tell the story of John Murray and the winds of change, it connects us to other Unitarian Universalists across the country and the world who are also listening to that same story. It syncs us up and it puts us in tune with one another. We share a sense of kinship and identity. Story binds us together. In the same way that moviegoers in a theater are brought together through story, we are brought together by the power of our living tradition, the history of Unitarian Universalism throughout the years. We learn about our history through story. In the words of our hymn this morning, as tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one into the sea, our sacred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free. Stories and the living tradition help our sacred hearts and minds unite. John Murray, the hero of the story we heard earlier, was born in England in 1741. He was raised in a Calvinist family. As an adult, he heard the message of universal salvation. He wasn't convinced of those ideas the first time he heard them, but over time he grew to embrace them. He did preach the message of universal salvation in England. And he encountered multiple tragedies in his life. These led him to a place of enormous grief and despair. He became bankrupt. He went to debtor's prison. His wife and his son died. John Murray entered a period of personal despair and lost his calling to preach universalism. He went to America in an effort to escape religion and the pain of his life. And there he did meet a man named Thomas Potter, who also believed in universal salvation. Thomas Potter invited him to preach in his chapel. John Murray became a well-known preacher of universalism in the United States, and he became connected with the grassroots Universalist movement in the United States. That movement grew and in time merged with the Unitarian movement to form the Unitarian Universalist Association. And so there is a thread you can follow from John Murray's preaching to our contemporary Unitarian Universalist movement. This story of John Murray is part of the story of Unitarian Universalism that shapes who we are today, and it brings us together. The doctrine of universalism in the 18th century has evolved over time, and it still influences what we believe about love, compassion, justice, and human nature. The influence of that universalist heritage can be seen in the idea that we are surrounded by love and we are held in love. In the words of Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker, There is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will. The story of John Murray reminds us that we are connected to a tradition larger than ourselves, and we are also connected to spiritual wisdom that enriches our lives for the better. When we watch the movie of our living tradition, we need to think about who all the actors are in the movie. Who's playing the lead roles? Who's playing the supportive roles? And who's not on the screen? In our living tradition, we often speak of white men acting out the main parts. Hosea Ballou, for example, was a well-known preacher of universalism in the 19th century. William Ellery Channing is considered one of the founders of Unitarianism in the United States. Ralph Waldo Emerson started his career as a Unitarian minister, but then went on to become the leader of the Transcendentalist movement. But they're not the only players in our history. Our belief that every person is worthy of love and belonging calls us to widen the circle of who we honor and recognize in our history. It calls us to lift up voices that have been marginalized in the past. We can and must tell the story of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a Black woman born in 1825 who was an abolitionist, suffragist, poet, teacher, public speaker, and a writer. She was also a Unitarian. We need to tell the stories of Mary Safford and members of the Iowa Sisterhood. In the 19th century, Unitarians wanted to spread their religion to the Midwestern states, but a lot of male ministers didn't want to leave their jobs near Boston for lower paying jobs where life was harder. Women ministers found an opening for their leadership and led churches throughout the Great Plains. As Unitarian Universalists, we are telling a story not only of where we have been, but a story of where we are going together. In considering how we're moving forward, I look to the work of the Commission on Institutional Change. The Unitarian Universalist Association has charged this commission with supporting long-term cultural and institutional change that redeems the essential promise and ideals of Unitarian Universalism. One of its purposes is to seek, quote, the articulation of a liberating Unitarian Universalism which is anti-oppressive, multicultural, and accountable to the richness of our diverse heritage. I wonder, what are the stories that can redeem the essential promises and ideals of Unitarian Universalism? What are the stories that can help us articulate a liberating Unitarian Universalism that is anti-oppressive, multicultural, and accountable to the richness of our diverse heritage? I look forward to exploring these questions with you. In the living tradition, we are not just the audience watching the movie. We are the writers, directors, producers, costume designers, actors, editors, and more. Together, we are creating the story of our living tradition. We are living out the mission of this congregation in ways that impact the world, large and small. Our story will be told to our children and our children's children. What kinds of stories do we want to tell as we live out our mission and vision in the world? It is up to us to write them together. May the stories we tell connect us to our living tradition and help us feel that we are a part of something greater than ourselves. Let us learn from our history and tell our stories in a way that is inclusive and affirming of all people. In the words of the hymn we sang today, may we revere the past, but trust the dawning future more. May we be a prophetic movement with a liberating ministry. May we go forward in the power of love and proclaim the truth that makes us free. May it be so.
The closing words I am going to share with you today were written by a group of students at Tufts University who took a class on Universalist history in the 1950s. They had an assignment to write what the zeitgeist, the spirit of history, would have said to John Murray. Somewhere along the way, these words were wrongly attributed to John Murray himself, and actually in our hymnal, John Murray is listed as the author. These are the words. Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God.
We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again.